bless your name, Father, because the name is the only name we can talk, that man can be saved. It's by your name. We thank you for Jesus. We thank you for these that are here this morning, Father. We pray right now that you will be with them and be and guide us as only you can do it. We thank you for what you've done thus far and what you're going to do in the future. Help us now as only you can do it and you will. And we're going to be so glad to give you the praise. For his praises go up, the blessings do come down. And we all stand in need of a blessing. Yes, we ask and bless you now. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.
Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
In this workshop, there's one thing would like to ask. We go to number 3, this is Kenneth Dudley, with the county engineer to discuss the Keaton Beach signage. And number 6, the board to discuss the scrap and the SCOP project program. Is that okay with the board? Okay, Mr. Dudley.
Sir.
It's you.
Surprise that it was me. Yes, sir. So what I was here to, the reason I was here is to participate in the discussion regarding a request that came back up in May last month. And it was, the board had issued a request or a thought to have installed a responsive flashing speed limit sign, a feedback sign basically, on the beach road as you're entering into the community of Keaton Beach. The speed limit reduces down from a 55 mile per hour speed down to the 25 before you get to the J.L. Gibson road. So what I did is I kind of reached out and looked at, within DOT, there are what's called a pay item structure that kind of gives the historical cost of some of those various items. And what was determined was that if you were to try to do this as an electric service, which would mean that it would necessitate an ongoing monthly expense as well as coordinated with a point of service, it would be $6,200 for the installation, approximately, of course. And then if you were to try to go to a solar installation, then that cost is going to double to $12,350. And that's historical cost that DOT gave us for the last 12 months. The other question is that she asked me, you know, what were my, she being the county administrator asked me, you know, what my thoughts were and about an installation such as this. And truthfully, I'm not so sure that it would necessarily provide the expected benefit that it's hoped for. Geometrically, you don't have a lot of driver feedback that encourages drivers to slow down because of the perception that they're approaching into a congested area or so. And I say that because the speed reduced area is really extended back away from the area that the congestion really tends to be present. So I would say that I think you're going to get drivers that, much like the way that the speed limits are today, they're going to become intolerant to it. You will have some reaction because of the flashing nature of it. It's going to give you that feedback to show you what your speed is relative to the regulatory speed limit. But just a thought that I would think that it would be much more responsive and beneficial if it were closer to the actual congestion as opposed to being further back up. Because you have to think about today, you have over 2,000 vehicles per day that are running up that road, running up and down that road. And that is a major collector roadway. And you've got individuals that are running 55 miles per hour in an open major collector road that they really don't perceive any reason for slowing down except for that regulatory signage there. So doesn't seem to be coincident with a reason to slow down. So that's what I'm saying is that, you know, yes, this will be a feedback and provide some benefit, but I don't think it'd be as dramatic as one would hope for. So it's just something to think about if you're going to go forward with incurring this expense. Obviously, if you go for the solar, it is a higher capital cost, but it's not a recurring monthly expense. If you go with the cheaper, I say cheap, $6,000 for this, you will still have that monthly recurring expense.
Are there other maintenance costs with these?
Certainly, it's a lighted system, so you're going to have anything electronic that you're going to have to expect that there are going to be some recurring periodic. They go with LED systems now, so it has more durability and longevity, but obviously there's some aspect that you're going to have recurring maintenance expense. I was actually thinking about that just a minute ago, and I don't have a grasp on what that is, but it wouldn't be unreasonable to expect some.
Are there other methods that might attain the objective? Beyond, I mean, I know we talked about flashing light, it just seems like a very substantial amount, given your description, and I don't disagree. I'm not certain that it's going to.
Yeah, I don't mind taking ownership of that description by any means, and I think that typically when you're traveling on the roadway, it seems to make sense when you see signage depending on where you're at on the roadway. When you come into a congested city, you naturally feel the encroachment, so you have that tendency to slow down. You put a regulatory speed limit reduction out in the middle of a major collector roadway where your perception is you're on a major highway, and you're in an open highway system, you're not gonna have that sense that I need to slow down. And I think that's why I did it last weekend, and you're running down that road and it's like, dang, I gotta go from my free flow speed all the way down to what's perceived as a crawl, way back up here because of why. So that's what, I don't think the why is really there to reaffirm why you're slowing down.
So would another speed limit sign or other sign, I mean, I don't disagree with what you're describing, I'm just trying to understand. if
Yeah, there's a
something
song that
that's
says,
not $6,000 or $12,000 to accomplish the task.
there's a song out there that says signs everywhere, there's signs, blocking out the scenery.
So if it won't work, it won't work, I mean, I get it, but
I just think
is
it's gonna
there
be,
anything, is it painting on the road? What other reminders or what other options could be used?
obviously, one thing you can do, we use a conventional roadside signage size, dimensional sign. They make, there's one upsize for that that's called oversize, or what you see on the express and freeways to make it more obvious. That's a cheaper passive expenditure. Short of that, I don't know what's going to discourage users that are perceiving they're on an open roadway to slow down 30 miles an hour. I mean, they're being told, cut your speed literally almost in half, and they don't know why. And they're having to maintain that for a long time.
So if we put more notice of the golf carts, because typically, really, that's why we're saying it's entered into a golf
I know,
cart.
and it is, and it's, that location is chosen because of a point of access for a golf cart to have the convenience of accessing the community, which is a quarter mile down the road.
Indeed.
So, I understand the reasoning of why the 25 was pushed back. I'm just telling you that from a transportation perspective, it doesn't coincide with the reasoning of why the regulatory speed limit would be there.
Kenneth, what about speed bumps, similar to,
Yeah, and I thought about that as well. Maybe a speed table or a speed hump that, that's a drastic,
yeah, not the one that just tears.
On the strips rather than speed bumps.
You could.
You run 40 mile an hour across them, but it's pretty much telling you to slow down.
yes, sir. I don't disagree. I think I would almost encourage you to put them full length across the road, because of the propensity of someone to not see somebody and have the little I'll drive around type mentality. That's an audible cue that you're entering into an area. Obviously, that is something that probably a 5-year frequency that you have to go and redo those thermoplastic strips. So yes, sir, that is a cheaper method of alerting the drivers that you're coming into something.
What would the ballpark cost be with that versus these two?
Last one I remember, I think if it was contractor installed, I wanna say $1,200 for a set of them.
So a tenth of the cost of the solar.
Oh, yes, sir, very obvious, cheaper expense, for sure.
Well, I know at the intersection of 221 and 14 up there, you know, you had the bumper strips, and it looked like everybody slowed down. There were very few wrecks happened there. You know where that is? Up there, Shady Grove?
By the Rockies, right there at the Rockies.
Yeah.
I know them on 14, yes, sir. Yes, sir. I was thinking 221, and I was trying to figure out where they
Well,
were.
that is 221, Rock is on 221.
Yes, sir, I was thinking north-south, but yes.
I think we should look at, you know, total cost of speed bumps and so this next year.
Rumble strips.
Yeah.
How close to the houses and speed bumps gonna be is the thing.
Nowhere near a residence.
Back up beyond the store, right?
It is above jail, it's.
Yeah, and there's 1,000 foot or so on Dale Gibson at least.
No, it's further,
QC.
The 25 actually starts there at the first entrance to the ice house.
right, it's,
And then it steps down before jail Gibson from 55 to 45, 35, and to 25, just prior to getting to the first driveway, going into the ice house there.
Remember years ago, they put them there.
We've moved them 3 times.
And they went away. People, woke people up, you know, trying to sleep at night, going over the speed bumps, and they did away with them bumps, I mean.
I wouldn't say put them down by the houses, I would pretty well stop it right
It's
there.
not anywhere near the houses.
Pull the photograph, I would.
You would do it where you're at your first speed reduce is where I would suggest it, to alert you that you're coming into a location to where you need to be decelerating. You wouldn't put it at the point that you should already be slowed down.
I think we should look at the total cost there and how many speed bumps we need to put down. Make sure we don't have that before we do.
There's a big difference.
Yeah.
We don't wanna have your decisions on
Yeah.
speed bumps, but that's pretty aggressive. That's fine, obviously that is a much cheaper, option to pursue. It gives a audible cue to the drivers. Outside of that, I think they're going to be intolerant of it, just like they are today. It's difficult to slow down to 25 when you're coming in here.
So we discussed that, you sort of got an idea of what you think we might want.
Yes, sir. Well, let me just tell you, how much is enough? I mean, if it's, say, we can apply these for $2,000, is that something the board wants to move forward with? So where do we pay for it?
If we can agenda that for the next meeting, that's enough time.
Well, given that expense level, it seems more of an administrative decision to me, but,
I'm ready to.
I think you guys can give me consensus versus, and then she administratively acts on it.
Well, I mean, I would think that it would be much more productive and cost effective. You know, so I think all the way around, the rumble strips would be meeting the need, this price tag of escalation, but sufficient for alerting, drivers that, you know, there's a speed reduction.
Okay. No problem.
We don't make motion on that, okay.
You know,
You go into number 6. Scott?
Yes, sir. So, what I was going to do was kind of give you a little bit of, an update on where we're at. Recent history, we have closed out, several jobs. As you recall, we closed out the Houck Road, we've closed out Pinecrest, and, we are, as of this morning, trying to close out the Fully Cutoff Road. We have an active roadway that is both, east and north Ellison roads are under,
Active?
yes, are under construction. First Avenue in Steinhatchee is in design. Slaughter Road is finished design, but it's in permitting, the final stages of permitting. So once the ERP is issued there, we'll go for advertisement for bids on that. Hopefully that happens in a month or so. I've been trying to push on them a little bit to get them to finish it. Gas Plant Road, as you know, has already been designed, bid, received, and a supplemental agreement for funding. So we are going to have that one, under construction, I would say probably within 2 months, because once you do the contract arrangement, typically they'll want a couple months for mobilization, excuse me, a couple weeks for mobilization. And Cedar Island, I finished the geotech report, I got that last week, so I will be continuing to work on the design for that one. That's all of the ones that we have that are either just completed or actively have active operations going on, whether that's construction, design, or permitting. So beyond that, we look what's coming next. What we have coming with an expectation of this year is Ash Street and Contractors Road. Those are both slated for funding agreement to be received by the board later this year. So I had a discussion with DOT last week. We have routine project status meetings, and in that, when we were looking at Ash Street and we were talking about the cost of it, and this is one that was put in, I think, back in 2016. And then in some of the discussions that happened subsequent to that, the board said, well, where are you starting from and where are you ending? We were starting from US 19, extending all the way to the east side of Johnson Strickland Road. At that point, there was a desire from the board to say, well, can we include the section of the roadway that is west of US 19? I said, well, yes, we can ask and see what they say. So I did. I posed a question to DOT back in 2019, because that was when it was being discussed by the board. And I provided them an updated cost estimate that was an additional, I think, right around the neighborhood of $400,000 to grab that subsequent section. It kind of just stayed there. I never heard any more correspondence about it. So when I was talking to them last week, they made mention of it, said, well, we never saw anything on that. And I said, hold on, let me pull up my emails. And yes, sir, if you look on January 29th of 2019 at 3:33 p.m., you received an email on this. And you could hear them typing as well, and they just kind of went quiet for a second and said, oh. And so we kind of left it at that. And they said, well, we do have an opportunity to where we can maybe adjust the programming of other roads to allow additional funding to be shifted over towards this one, if this is your primary one at that time. I said, okay, you know, that maybe that's something that we can consider, but I kind of need to kind of understand the board's perspective on whether they still have that desire to include that additional segment of Ash Street, and if they do, we just need to be very open and understand the ramifications and consequences when we make those decisions on how they affect other projects. So I started conversations with the county administrator and told them that, you know, I told her that what DOT is offering to do is, because they're right, the timing is to where they're writing their agreements. So it's easy for them at this point in time to make adjustments versus them making their way into formal agreements and then having to adjust that later, because it's quite intensive after it gets programmed. So what she and I kind of ended up was that we would bring it to the board to where we would suggest that if you still have that desire to catch this last segment of Ash Street and include it within that project, and I know I can't stand here and say that there's any better time to do it if you want to do that segment, then we need to understand that there is a very strong likelihood, it's pretty certain, that it will need to affect the other road that's programmed in here, that being Contractors Road. So what they've suggested is that Contractors Road, if we choose to pull $400,000 from that program project and roll it into Ash Street, then Contractors Road would need to slip back into the next fiscal year funding cycle. Well, the weekend went, and you know, I was kind of thinking how this was going to go, and if you guys wanted to do this, because I really don't have an opinion on it. It's 6 one, half a dozen other to me, whichever way you want to do, because it's either additional work with Ash Street, it still expands that one, it's most cost effective at that point in time, or we still do Contractors Road and we don't do that part now. Meaning that if you did wanna do that, but you don't wanna affect Contractors Road, then I will tell you with certainty that there is a guarantee from the time you say you want to do it, it's at least a 5-year delay. Because that is where we're at in the 5-year programming cycle. So I talked with DOT yesterday and I told them, I said, look, I'm going before the board tomorrow and I wanna kind of have my P's and Q's all in a row here. And they said that, well, we've been talking about this internally, and it kind of bothered them that I had sent that information to them back in 2019 and nothing really happened. So I've used a lot of words to get to the point that I'm able to give you some good news. And the good news is that DOT is willing to fund that $400,000 deficit to make up the difference on Ash Street without an impact to Contractors Road program. Which is amazing.
That is.
In and of itself, and that's great, obviously, because what I told them, I was really concerned that there would be a domino effect of when you roll one project to to a subsequent fiscal year, it's got to affect another project, and that's got to affect another project, at some point, where does it stop? And they had the same concern, I don't know where it came from, but they have money within the SCOP program. I fully expect that we'll receive an Ash Street agreement in December, I think it is. So that's when I would bring it back to you guys for authorization to approve it. And then the Contractors Road, right now it looks like that's gonna be received sometime in January of next year. And then hopefully, things continue the way they are, and our programs we have funded after that, the McDaniel, Spring Warrior, some other bridges and stuff, hopefully they'll be all able to hold their cue and timing. So I expected to make you have to make a tough decision today, and I was on the phone with him like at 5:30 yesterday evening, so it's pretty late, off the press type news, but you and myself both got out of the hot seat.
Industrial Drive in the future.
Yes, sir, Industrial Drive is on the list. I've got the 5-year program in front of me, but I don't see it, readily see it. It may be there, but I may be missing it. But I do know that it was added, several years ago to the bottom of the original list. It is one of them that's in there. Matter of fact, I think I submitted an application for it maybe 2 years ago, something like that. They're all running together now.
It was about 2 years out.
No. Remember, it's a 5-year work program. So any day that you guys say, I want this road on the list, understand, it is a list that's 5 years from now. So it's not today.
That's like Spring Warrior, we asked for it several years ago.
Spring Warrior's been on there, seems like it may have made its first presence around 2012 or so. And then there were subsequent years that it came out. I think it's fiscal year 2025. So that is a 2024 possible funding allocation. And I wanna say it's like $3 million or something like that. So that one is tough because it's a large cost. They have a finite pot of dollars and they go through and we give them 3 priorities and they have to screen those. And a lot of times it gets to the point where you have to make a decision. I can't do my number 1 because it exceeds how much money they are willing to commit to our county, but I could do number 2. So there's a little bit of that goes on. With a cost like that of that large for Spring Warrior, it's tough for them to fund it in any 1 year. Typical, if you're gonna get it funded in 1 year, you're not gonna get anything else.
Plantation Road, I get a lot of calls about it, because it's turned into a main drag now between 27 and 19. It's a solid traffic going down Plantation now,
Plantation Road is also on the list. I don't recall the timing off the top of my head, but and that may have been 2 years ago that I submitted an application on that as well. It's somewhere in that neighborhood.
You still expect the study from the Army Corps of Engineers to benefit First Avenue?
Well, yes, sir, they are still moving forward with the study on all of the 10 various areas. There is no cost, there's no dollars coming out of that for a benefit of First Avenue. So that's where we're still, I think she's seeking some legal advice from Conrad with respect to the Recovery Act, that those dollars are gonna be applicable to that project, to add to that project to address the drainage in that area.
Actually, we're waiting on the final rule from Treasury, which, we're still working off the interim final rule from Treasury for those, how to spend those dollars. So as soon as we receive the final rule from Treasury, I think we'll have a better idea of if that project, or any of those projects, if that would be an appropriate use of the funds. The wording's a little vague now on stormwater projects.
But I thought we were hopeful those events were gonna come together with the design completion.
Well, you threw me when you said benefit of that project, because I start thinking dollars at that point. But yes, we are looking for timing to be to where Army Corps is going to either confirm what we are suggesting already,
Right.
that's incorporated in the design,
Yes.
or they will revise our thought process to where maybe we need a different configuration. I am extremely hopeful that we can use those Recovery Act dollars, because we know it appears very strongly that we need additional conveyance under First Avenue to be able to avoid that inundation across the roadway. If that's the case, the easiest method for that is to add an additional barrel to the existing box culvert that's there. Therein lies a problem, because when you go from, right now there's 2 8-foot wide barrels, 8 foot wide totals, 2 of them 16 foot. When we throw another one on there, if we match the conveyance of the other 2, that goes to 4 feet. The bridge definition starts at 20 feet. So their DOT's red flags have been thrown up to where it brings in different people to review it. And there is a concern with respect to SCOP dollars being able to replace, total replacement of something to create a bridge. So we're trying to work through that. If the recovery dollars are acceptable for expenditure on this project, then I don't think we have any issues. But we gotta figure out if that's the case. Because the way it is you spend it, and then you ask, or then they critique it, and then they may tell you, that wasn't a good expense, so you can't use that money. That's what I'm kinda worried about.
And then we have
We have to pay it back. So there's no pre-approval process, and that was one of the FAQs. If there's a pre-approval process and the wording was such as, no, you need to follow the guidelines. And if we follow the guidelines inappropriately, then yes, there would be callbacks.
Okay. And I would say that if the verbiage in the final rule doesn't change from the interim rule now, then it would probably be in our best interest to solicit our own request for a clarification and be specific in what we envision that our method of expensing, to make sure we don't get into that position. Because I would love to have more clarity than what I'm reading in there now.
So, I mean, all of that said, we're not expecting that to delay the design.
The design is moving forward, yeah, absolutely. It's, we're at a 90% level. I received that a week or so ago, and, you know, once we get the review finished on that, the comments incorporated, we'll start our public outreach, to address, some encroachments and other things that are in the right of way, and kind of let people know what we're going to do and when we expect to do it. So we can kind of get those questions answered before we get into the meat of construction.
So it would appear that those things are proceeding as expected, time-wise.
Yes, sir. As I said, there's nothing to slow that down. We're going to move forward with that. Army Corps is making their best effort to piecemeal their results to where we can receive that first study area. And they started on it basically before we even got the agreement resolved with them. So they've had time already invested in it. I look forward to those results, you know, in a month or two from them. they're gonna give us those, we'll be able to see pretty readily, is this matching what we've done, or do we need to make a little bit of an adjustment? I'm expecting it's gonna be pretty consistent within the context of the First Avenue footprint. We know there are different, there are also additional issues that we need to address on Seventh Street and Second, south of there, in order to allow a conveyance to the river.
Eliminating gun walkway.
Correct. Yeah, or blockage, yes, because, you know, there's nothing under Seventh now. So that's an obvious one, but as you all know, dollars are tough. So Hank doesn't have in his budget monies to sit there to throw in a couple box culverts under Seventh Avenue or to expand the culvert system under Second. So we need to find some other means of funding and, you know, hopefully the Recovery Act dollars will do that. That's kind of a saving grace, but if it doesn't, you know, you guys are gonna have a tough decision on figuring out how you're gonna do it. I think it's smart to do what we can do on First Avenue while we are constructing it. I don't wanna do it later.
We already got it, traffic in.
I wanna tear it up once.
Yeah.
That's it. There's no action from you guys. It was literally just a status update. I was thinking I was gonna have to ask you for some action, to make sure that you were fully aware and did it with an open mind. And, luckily we do not have to. Yeah.
Okay.
All right, I'm done.
You got something else?
No, sir, I will not.
All right.
See,
Thank you. We go to number 4, Mr. Ray Curtis, to discuss the history of Taylor Coastal Water and Sewer District.
Commission, thank you for allowing me a spot on the agenda this morning. The folks behind me are just a few of the landowners down there that have been impacted by what they deem historically to be arbitrary decisions of the Taylor Coastal Water and Sewer Board that are not really based in their view in any type of law. And one of them asked to speak to you and address you before I gave the presentation because they're in time crunch to get back to their employment. I don't know if you want to entertain that or not.
Yeah, we can.
Thanks, Fred. Thanks, Commissioner. My name's John Everett, address is 200 Bishop Road, Water. In 1993, I moved to Cedar Island, and we, after Storm of the Century, moved back to Perry in 1996 and sold our house. And that was during the time that when I was there, that several put together a committee to actually buy Mr. Grimes out down and form the Coastal Water Board, which I was original part of. When I was moving back to Perry, that's about the time that it came to fruition to put in the water lines, you know, hook up to everybody's house. And they didn't quite have enough water lines to hook up, so I sold my house, but needed more water lines, more hookups to be able to get the loan package done. So I agreed to put one in at my boat dock. At the time, I didn't have a boat dock there, and then, you know, put it in a, you know, boat dock, and just say I had a place to come and go. And so, and I agreed to pay the minimum, although I never turned water on for 2 months a year. So for over 19 years, I paid a water bill. And in 2017, they decided, well, they would send me a letter say either pay for a grinder pump or we're gonna take your water meter out. I said, well, I don't have anything to hook a grinder pump up to. They said, well, you may put an RV in. I said, listen, I'll give you an affidavit stating that one is I won't hook an RV up to it or allow anybody else to. You know, and I said, that's all I want is just water for my boat. And under the rules, they said, well, you gotta have either an ice machine or landscaping. So I said, okay, so if I got landscaping, I can get water. Yeah, but I can't have it just to put fresh water in my boat or wash it down. She said, no. I said, well, that's, you know, kind of arbitrary, especially if they're paying for 19 and a half years, you know, which, you know, allowed them to have it. And, but, you know, that didn't matter then. You know, but there's some concern obviously about RVs. I said, you're going, wait a minute. I said, you drive around, you got houses that have 3 RVs around the house, all getting water from the house. You know what I mean? You know, I took lots of pictures, you know, during a period of time down there. Or then they have a little temporary house, which I got a picture of one of them here, just sitting on the dirt, like on the Fun Beach. they got water coming over to the neighbor, you know, and so it depends on, I don't know, maybe it depends on who you were, this particular person had it on the ground, and they happened to be 2 doors down from the person on the board. You know what I mean? But they had the right family name, so, I didn't even push it, you know, a whole lot, but it really kind of bothered me a whole lot that, you know, I need water from my boat and can't get it, you know, and then you have other people that you can have one sewer and one water hookup, and then you've got 4 or 5 RVs dumping into that, you know what I mean? So like, and then the reason they gave me for taking my water out, which is, you know, letter from them, was based upon the fact that said that I didn't have anything to hook it to, a building. Well, no, I didn't have a building to hook it to, or sewer, so I said, I never, but then.
Go ahead.
Anyway, I just felt like I was, you know, dealt with wrong there, you know what I mean, because, you know, I said, all I want is just water on boat, you know, and such time comes along, you know, if I ever build a house, then yeah, I'll need sewer hookup, but I didn't wanna pay a sewer and a water bill for 2 months out of the year, which I hardly ever used. Even then, I never once used more than a minimum. And then a lot of people, other people just do a lot of other things, you know, and in their own rules, there's no justification for them actually disconnecting, okay? And you look and Ray did some research for me based upon state law and your laws, there's no justification to what they did to me. Anyway, I just felt like I was treated terribly by them, and what they did was just.
In other words, they got you unhooked right now.
I haven't had water in 4 years. You know what I mean? In
But you paid for water for how many years?
19 and a half.
Never used it.
Never used more than a minimum, and only used it 2 months out of the year, but I continued to pay for water because they needed the water hookups initially. They didn't have enough hookups to meet the minimum to get the USDA loans and all that. I said, in order to help the board, I did that. You know, now I wanted to I'll pay for water today, just to have it for my boats and my friends, you know, when we come down and need water on our boats or wash down or whatever it may be. Not hooking RV up to
So
it.
it's their practice now not to allow water without sewer service?
That's mine, yeah, that's right. Unless you're willing to put it in, I guess unless you're willing to put in a grinder pump, then, or sewer. You know, because they're afraid you're gonna hook up to an RV. And then another question I got is that, you know, if they were concerned about me hooking RVs up to my water and maybe renting space, you know, maybe you may rent your property to somebody who has an RV and they can go dump the sewer somewhere else, maybe it's the neighbor's house that's got a, you know what I mean? Well, maybe that's a conflict with one of the board members, you know, who did not declare conflict. You know, which I brought that up, you know, and of course that was convenient, all that was conveniently left out of there. I asked for a copy of the minutes, a lot of that's conveniently left out of their minutes.
There's a conflict with the Taylor Coastal Water and Sewer Board?
With one person on the board, if you got a person on the board who's renting lots for RVs, and they're concerned, well, maybe I may rent a lot, and maybe I'm competing with them. So there was an obvious conflict there, at least with one person on the board who I felt like should have, under the Robert Rules of Order, should have declared a conflict and stepped out of the ring.
What does the rest of this board say about this? Do they just go along with this?
Well, you got a lot of board members that are new today.
So this was during the time you were serving on the board?
No, this is in 2017 when I went and approached the board, the district, and went in the sewer board.
Was this during the time that you lost your service?
Yeah, in 2017.
But you weren't serving on that board
Oh,
then?
no, I served only in the 1990s, and I left the beaches in 1996, I resigned and came to Perry. And subsequently after that, whenever Jeb Bush got elected governor, I was living back in Perry. I agreed to serve on the water management board, and what happened was, the Swanee River Water Management Board. And so I called Travis, who was still on the board, Travis Beach, and said, hey, I found an avenue for us to get sewer to clean up our beaches, you know, and build back some of these houses, people lost their houses. And I called Travis and told him, I figured out how to get it done, and that's why that street and that board's even there. I figured out how we could politically get that sewer system into our beaches, which has allowed for all this growth, clean up our canals, clean up our beaches, you know? Anyway, so I guess,
So that apparently wasn't taken up?
I don't know. And it didn't really have anything to do with it, you know what I mean? The reason I took out my water meter.
So it wasn't retaliatory?
Huh?
You didn't want to expansion?
vegetation and growth. Yeah, they cleaned up our ditches and all that, I mean, it's unmeasurable. So, anyway, I do try to do the right thing, so, and I did not choose to file a lawsuit, which I probably, in hindsight, maybe I should have, but I felt like that, you know, that, yeah, I'm very hesitant about coming against my neighbors with something like that. But I want y'all to know the truth.
Yeah, appreciate it.
All right, thank you. Thank you.
Pardon?
Yeah, start that one timer for me, since you have my mail.
All right, thank you.
Right.
Got it. All right, Ken, thank you for having me out, to speak to you about this. So, I have the first 11 pages of what you see on the screen there, printed out, but that document you see on the screen is 300 pages, so, none of us wanted to generate that much ink on paper. The first 11 pages are the county's template request to be placed on the agenda form. So, and that form asks for what you say is the statement of the issue, what the fiscal impact would be, and then budget expense, who's submitted by, and whether or not there's a fiscal impact. So, the instant issue that brings me before you is somewhat related indirectly to the discontent of a whole lot of people that live in that district for what they perceive as arbitrary decisions that don't necessarily seem to be based on law, or exceptions made for certain people. Now, if I see examples of that as I'm walking through the presentation, I'll point them out, but I kind of want to just go through this. So your county code mandates that anybody that's within this certain area, the zone that your code sets forth, which is the map on the screen. So, come on, keyboard. All right. So that's the map. All right, you see on the southern end, it goes down south of Fish Creek all the way to, that looks like Sponge Point right there. And it goes all the way in the north end up to Spring Warrior Fish Camp. All right, so it's a big zone, but it essentially is pretty closely mirroring the coastal high hazard zone, the places that would flood the worst when there's a storm. So that's the area in your statute that says if we have municipal service within a certain proximity of your house, you're mandated to connect. All right. And so, now that being said, you don't have service all the way through yet, but we'll get to that. So, all right. So the people that are within that district, if they're within a certain distance of your infrastructure, they've got to connect. And so in 2011, well, back up, when, as Mr. Everett was saying, whenever the project kind of went from being more than a dream to an action plan, the idea is get the septic tanks out of the ground, get the runoff and the leaching out so that we're not having the high bacteria counts in the water, and we've got nice clean water for scalloping and play and recreation. All right, and so the plan kind of starts to move forward on how to get that done, and there are grant applications, loan applications, bond applications issued in order to construct the first phase of the sewer project. There's already some water in place, so there was water first, but then the sewer project came along. And so you end up having a first phase, a second phase, and then a phase 2, part 2, which was an add-on later. But during that period of time, before there was sewer in place, pretty much your whole beaches area was all zoned mixed-use urban development. At that time, your county code, your land planning said that's 20 units per acre. All right, and so as developed, pardon?
20 what?
20 units per acre is the density that was set forward in your code.
All right, you mean you connect 20 pieces to it.
Well, you would have to meet you would have to have an approved development plan. So for instance, if you own 1 acre, you can't build right up to the sides because you have setback requirements. So there are other things, but assuming you could meet all of the other county requirements or state requirements or water management district requirements, you could have that amount of density, that many residential units per acre. And so as the sewer project is getting underway and the county is moving on, the Department of Community Affairs, the DCA, an agency of the state of Florida, now defunct, now part of another agency, but at that time it was a standalone, they came down here to Taylor County and said, oh, I don't think so. No, this should be 4 units per acre. And so there was a big fight about it. And Conrad, correct me if I'm wrong, I know you were integral in helping the county fend them off and get to some of these agreements that occurred. But there's a fight that goes on for several years, and it ultimately is resolved by way of a litigation settlement agreement. So there's an actual case going on between the DCA and the county. The DCA says, we're not gonna allow you to have mixed-use urban development in the coastal high hazard zone, not 20 units per acre anyway. And so what ended up happening is this litigation agreement is reached, and it says 12 units per acre in mixed-use urban development. So the state of Florida and the county reached this agreement and said, you can do 12 units per acre. All right. And so phase 1 of the sewer is coming online, and it is running sewer to all of these areas that are now state-approved mixed-use urban development, 12 units per acre density. And then phase 2 starts getting worked on. Around that time in the late 2000s, Dr. Hutchins and Clinton Woods and one other person that owned property over there by Bird Island.
Captain Rick?
Miss Redding, that's correct. They own property over there by the Bird Island, and they come before the county and say, hey, I think our portion of property was supposed to be grouped in with this change. And so the county agreed, because what happens when you write up these agreements, it's got all these meets and bounds legal descriptions of what's supposed to be included, and so it's actually pretty easy to not realize that you've left something off. And so the county agreed with that and said, yes, that's part of the beaches area. That was supposed to be part of this mixed-use urban development, 12 units per acre. And so the county passed a zoning and land use change. Of course, you have to send that type of thing up to the state, and they have to give it the green light that it conforms with the comprehensive plan. And the DCA rejected it and said, oh no, we don't think that this was an error, and we're not agreeing to you changing these properties to mixed-use urban. Your current map shows them as ag. So sorry about your luck. And so now there's more litigation. The county, the DCA, and Dr. Hutchins, and Clinton Wood, and Miss Redding. And so there's more litigation for a while. In the end, there is a litigation settlement agreement signed in 2011, approved by this board and the state and all the parties, that says for these couple of properties, the density will be 10 units per acre on up to a certain amount of the acreage. And so, and let me find the future land use map. Also, part of the settlement agreement required that there be a marking on the face of the future land use map that specifically referenced these properties. So the state said, we'll agree to this, but you're going to put it on the face of your future land use map. One of the few properties is actually called out by property. This is what it's going to be, and that was part of the settlement agreement. And so this is your current future land use map, and you see that the condition was until such time as centralized sanitary sewer service is provided to Bird Island property, which was one application, the maximum density is 4 dwelling units per acre. Upon such time as centralized sanitary sewer service is provided to the parcel, a maximum of 10 dwelling units per acre shall be permissible on said parcel. And then the next paragraph was regard to the Hutchins property. So Bird Island and Hutchins property. So that was the agreement. That's reached in 2011. This whole Bird Island Fish Creek portion of the water and sewer plan, the building and construction plan, that was phase 2, part 2. That was the last part to get approved and come along. Now, all of these plans and every expenditure or tranche of funding had to be approved by the USDA Rural Development, USDA-RD. They had to approve basically every step of the way because they were the facilitator of the loan. And so they made their final approval in late 2012 or early 2013 for the design plans to run sewer to these properties and various other things, and then construction happened in 13. So 2 years after the county and all the property owners there agreed, all right, we missed round one, 12 units an acre, we're doing 10 units per acre maximum density, but the condition required by the state was that, and in the litigation agreement it says, per Department of Health rules, these properties will not be eligible for any kind of septic. That's recited in the agreement with the state of Florida. That leaves one option, which is the centralized sewer. And that's what the agreement was. That agreement happens and is signed off on in 2011. By the time USDA gets around to approving sewer to this property, that's 2 years later. Now, presumably, the USDA was agreeing that it was appropriate to run sewer there, knowing that that was the density requirements. All right. And last year, the Hutchins property sold, and it sold to my family, which lucky us. I told them at the outset, we need to send a letter to Taylor Coastal, because even though the place to find out what your zoning is and what you can do with your property is the future land use map. And even though it says it on the face of the future land use map, 10 units per acre, we still need to send a letter to the sewer municipality and just make sure that they confirm that, assuming there's capacity, we could have up to 10 units per acre, assuming an otherwise approved development plan, assuming we meet the setbacks and the other requirements in the county and state regulations. Because frankly, I had a little bit of a lack of trust for how they interpret the law based on some of my legal experience with them. And so we sent a letter, and they responded back and said, you can have, keep in mind, this property is 28 acres, 18 buildable acres that the county and the state and all the parties entered into a litigation agreement for 10 units an acre. And they responded with a letter that said, now you can have one sewer connection, just one. They have,
This for 14 acres?
so the agreement with the state was up to 10 units per acre on four.
From what you were saying, they agreed to one hookup for 14 acres.
One hookup for the entire parcel, which is, the parcel's 28 acres.
27.
Right, so it's 27 acre parcel, 18 of it is what I would call buildable, some of it's marsh and things like that. And then the litigation agreement, actually, they said up to 10 units per acre on 14 acres. So that was the litigation agreement. So it's 140 total units, assuming an otherwise approved development plan should be what that property is able to do. That's what you decided, that's what you agreed with, the state, everyone agreed to it. And so we get to a place now where the sewer water district has kind of dug their heels in and said, no, one. And so the question is, of course, and the big picture is, who sets density requirements for the county? Whose job is it to determine land use? Is it your subsidiary agency that you created? Do they get to tell you how to do it? Or is that really your authority? Statutorily, that's your job. Solely vested in you, only subject to the state approving that your changes are consistent with the overall comprehensive plan. That's your thing. But they, in essence, by saying, we don't care what agreement you've entered into, we don't care what land use designation that you've given an area or what density, we are going to limit it. Now, the justification that they tend to fall back on, well, it varies, but it'll be, well, the USDA letters of conditions, which were the precursor letters to getting the loans, said you can't have development or it can't be used for development. Kind of use broad stroke terms like that. And then there were a few more specific terms that you see referenced often. It talks about 181 pre-platted lots or any developed sites. It can be used for that. Of course, what a developed site is not really defined anywhere. Does developed mean it's already got an engineer approved development plan, or it's already built upon it? It doesn't really say, and the USDA doesn't seem to want to get into the making a case-by-case decision on what their terms really meant. Frankly, they gave out the loan, or permitted the loan, and they don't really want to have to come back to Perry, Florida, unless there's a real emergency. But that's the basis that they're giving. In practice, I'm about to run out of time. Do you want me to continue?
No, go ahead.
Hit the reset button.
I think you can just leave it.
Okay. In practice, what ends up happening is you have, on one day, you'll have the board or the staff say, well, you weren't on the original maps. Okay, they'll say, if you weren't on the original engineered maps for phase 1 or phase 2 or phase 2 part 2, then we can't run water to you because you weren't a developed site or something like that.
Future land use map, part of that?
When they say maps, what they're referring to are the engineered maps that were, bear with me a second, I'll pull one up. So say for instance, the phase 2, part 2 plans, which included Fish Creek, they were engineered plans like this, and it sort of looked like this sort of thing, where they're drawing out the areas and they're showing the lines that are running down the sides of the roads or whatnot. So when they say you weren't on the original map, and that's our reason for rejecting you, that's one of the things they're saying, or that's what they're referring to. Recently, let me see if I can, let me a second to pull up in the minutes here. This is a PDF with all the minutes up until of the Taylor Coastal Water and Sewer District from the beginning of time up through March 19 of 2021. It will load. Please bear with me, I do this. All right, here we go. So we're cruising on down here, and all right, so here we have a meeting where a gentleman came before, and this was, I believe, in 2020. And this gentleman came before him and said, well, we've determined that he was inadvertently left off the map. And so now he's approved, okay? Now they've told a bunch of other people, and I can show you in the minutes, they want him to deny it. They give no, you weren't on the map all the time as a reason for denying sewer or water. But then other people, well, it was a map error. And that's not the only map error. Here's another map error that was in 2020 as well, I believe, where, well, there's an empty lot next to it. It wasn't on the map, but it did have a this or that or the other. See, the site there was another mapping area, and it showed services provided. There's a whole lot of different examples like that where they tell one property owner, well, you weren't on the original map, or they'll say you can't do a lot split and then have 2 connections, you can only have 1. But then certain people take a piece of property that's 4 or 5 acres and split into 5 at 1 acre lots, and they end up finding some exception. So on the one hand, they say you can't do, we can't do development, you weren't on the original map, but then other people, they say, yes, you can. And so the kicker is drawing back to the central focus of this particular item that I bring before you is you've got 27 acres that is supposed to be developable. Now, does the landowner want to develop it? The landowner just wants to know what the rights are. Maybe the landowner wants to get a line of credit against it. Well, it's gonna make a big difference on what you could borrow against, that sort of thing. But before you can have a plan, you gotta know what your rights are. And you would think that we could look at your future land use map and it's depicted on the front and we could say, this is what our rights are. But when we're not allowed septic per the litigation agreement, our only way is municipal sewer. The agreement says the sewer will be available once it's run, but the agency that administers it says 1 unit per acre, basically lost those development rights unless this board exercises its power to rein them in, because that's basically where we're at right now. The statutes require us to make a claim against the agency within 1 year of the agency taking some action that we interpret as an unlawful restriction of our rights. All right, so that was October the 19th when we were told in writing, as to this property, you can only have 1 unit. So we have a clock on us. It's not a clock that we like. We don't want to be pressured into having to bring a claim, but it's move it or lose it. And so I don't know what the right answer is, but you've got an agency down there that is basically a runaway agency that is doing what they want. There doesn't seem to be any consistency. And when they give you a no, they give you one of two reasons generally. They either blame it on the USD loan documents or they tell you there are capacity problems. And you guys have been told that, at least this board has, in 2019, a representative of the district was here, and you can pull it off of YouTube and see the meeting. And you were told when you were saying, well, we want to let the RVs be down there. And you were told capacity is a real issue. If we get 50% capacity, we have to meet with DEP and then we're mandated to expand a plant. Right? If you want to see the recording, I'll pull it up. And then I'll pull up what the actual law is on DEP's website. And that's not at all the case. So those are the no's you get. It's either blame it on the loan conditions or tell you that we have a capacity problem. But they have to submit every 10 years a capacity report. The last one they submitted was last year, and it says that we've never exceeded 50% capacity, and we're not likely to exceed or meet capacity in the next 10 years. So I don't know what the right answer is, but I think you've got a sewer agency that is using any means they can to stifle development. And they're trying to put a label on it, that it's lawful or something like that. And I'm hoping that you guys would take some type of action to address that. Yes.
I guess it's probably a question for the board itself. Does this sewage and water board, have they ever come and give an update on their business as far as to the commission? Do they ever come before the board and give any kind of updates, or are they required, or why would they be required, I guess?
They have at one time. They have come up and explained why they didn't want to add, because of the loan they had. They didn't want that loan called for not following USDA rules. Isn't that exactly what they?
That's what they say, yes.
That's what they said.
Right.
And that was their excuse at that time. When you came up and wanted to get the trailer park across from the waterworks set up, that was their excuse.
That was, yes.
Yeah.
Well, it was twofold. That one, which is at 26 acres directly across the street from Taylor Coastal Water and Sewer, which is zoned ag. They would like to put in an RV park there, not on the water, but get some of the RVs up away from the water. And that's what they want to do. Of course, that's going to require a zoning change, which is going to come before this board. But before coming before you for a zoning change, we needed to check out and see what the water and sewage, if we would be able to access it. And Taylor Coastal Water and Sewer said, no, you won't be able to access it because you weren't on this original map, the one that I just showed you there. Which, of course, if they deem that there was a mapping error, they add you in after the fact. But they were told no, which is why we spent a year coming before this board and saying your statute mandates that if we're within 250 feet of their infrastructure, which the main runs right there, if we're within that range, we have to hook up to it. But they're telling us it would violate their loan terms to allow us to. So you've got 26 acres there, you can't even get a water hose on or drill your own well. And so the county said, okay, fine, if they can't do it, if they can't provide it, and they sign that in writing essentially, then you can go and apply to some other department, Department of Health or Water Management District too. So that's how that was resolved, except I don't know that it's gonna be resolved because as it's stated in these litigation agreements, Department of Health rules should prohibit any type of septic or anything else in a coastal high hazard. So that was sort of a punt for the time, but I think we're all gonna come back to the same place as development happens and this agency tells people no over and over and ever again. At some point, folks are gonna realize that they're violating the rules and they only got a year to exercise their rights and sue them. And here's the kicker for you guys, because I have no beef on this issue with any of you. But you own that agency. You created them. They are what's called a dependent district. So you are their boss. So when they do something that causes you to violate your agreements, or they do something that constitutes taking, ultimately where does the buck stop, right? It stops here. Whether it's through litigation or whatever it is, you guys ultimately, I mean, imagine Coastal Sewer Water gets its pantsuit off for taking 139 development unit rights from a coastal property. I guess that would put them in the ground. And then who comes and bails them out and refunds the agency, repopulates the board so that it can keep providing sewer and water to everybody down there? That's gonna fall to you guys. So I'm trying to bring it to your attention where you can get ahead of it. This board needs to carry out your directives, not act in an arbitrary way for one, and not act in such a way that defies your land use planning role. Otherwise, they're gonna cost you a lot of heartache and time and money. And I'm not saying that as a threat. It's just a big pain that you don't need. And they have the capacity, their own reports. Let me put, if you don't mind, let me put their reports up that they submit so that you can see this isn't just me saying it. Let's see, so we got, all right. So this is called the Capacity Analysis Report. They're required to submit this, there are rules for it, every 10 years, or once you eclipse a certain capacity, generally 50% or something like that, then every 5 years, sometimes more frequently. And there are certain things that they're required to set forth in those reports, and this is by DEP rules. They're required to certify several things, but the main one is, let me get down here to the pages that matter, is their conclusions. They're required to state what the future conditions are. And they say, overall, the percent capacity is well below permitted capacity. However, this is 3-month average daily flow, which DEP states is the best way to kind of gauge capacity and usage. Gives indication that the flows are seasonal, with the highest flows in July of each year. The overall trend is for a very slight increase, but the data is inconsistent. Past flows are pertinent when forecasting future flows. The trend line is extended till 2029, and then they come to the conclusion. Trending indicates the facility should be compliant for the upcoming permit cycle, which is 10 years. Flows are slightly increasing per the trending plot. And so, summary and conclusions. Based on the current trending analysis and noting that capacity has not been an issue in this facility in the past, the plant should not have capacity problems during the upcoming permit cycle for the upcoming 10 years. And then it talks about nutrient loads, and saying there's a little bit of nutrients in the water, but it's not a concern, So that's a report from just last year that they were mandated to submit to DEP. Now, you've been told before that if we hit 50% mandatory plant expansion, but that is not the case. If the engineer certifies that you will meet or exceed capacity within the next 5 years, then he also has to certify that the planning process has begun. Those are the DEP rules. So that there's not a capacity problem here. They've got about 500 customers on sewer right now, and they got the capacity for slightly more than what they already have during the peak season. And my basis for that, this is called a DMR summary. This is another document produced by Taylor Coastal Water and Sewer. And when you see we get over here, percent capacity, and you see the maximum 3-month average daily
low out of 80,000. 80,000 is the permitting capacity, all right? And so I'll zoom it back out for you where, hopefully make it a little easier to see. We got dates over here on the left. So we're going 06, 08. So let's just cruise on down and get to some more recent years. Here we are in the 18s and 19s, and let's see what our percentage capacity is. 38, 46, 46, 42, 29, 25, 29. In other words, you got 3 months there, June, July, August, when scalp season. Your 3-month average daily load permitted capacity is running mid-40s. Great. Your busiest times, you're only tapping 45% capacity. But they'll tell you, at least until they're getting called out in inspection, they've told you before on video that it's a capacity problem, and it frankly is not. Now, they were invited, Taylor Coastal was invited to come to a meeting, the commission staff, by the county staff. I was gonna be present as well, so we could talk these issues through and say, all right, tell us where we're wrong. Tell me where I'm wrong. I'm looking at your data. Tell me where I've missed it. They declined. We held the meeting anyway without them. Nothing behind closed doors. They were invited, didn't show up. We talked the issues. And the decision was made to let's ask for a workshop and then invite them to come to that, so that this information could get to you and not be just presented by one side. But if there's a counter to what I'm telling you with their data, put it out there. And they declined that as well. And instead opted to just invite one of your commissioners down to their meeting. And so, I don't know what to tell you about that. I just know that the Curtises have a clock that's mandated by statute. We're gonna lose rights if we don't act, and we don't want to go that route. And also, we just want you to resolve this problem for everybody at the beaches that has been getting peculiar and seemingly arbitrary answers. Like some folks over here wanting to get some easel or wanting to get some grinder pumps and things like that, and they're being told, well, this wasn't on a particular map, or that wasn't on a particular map, so sorry about your luck. Or you can only have one. Well, I'm sorry, the density is what guides how many you can have there, not how many you think. And they have, in the 2019 meeting, when they presented to you, they said, you know, the original design plan was for 1 unit per parcel number. That's not true. I went all the work of putting together the minutes from all the time. They created that policy. They did it, not you, not the state, not anyone else. That was a policy they voted on and put in place. So, but it still kind of gets enforced on people. Say, for instance, like the Curtises. You have one parcel number, you have one house, you get one connection. So, if you have lots and lots of time for me to go through here, I would show you that Benji too, with all his land there at Cedar Island that he's got. Sorry, we can't give you sewer and water. It wasn't on the original map. They don't even look at density stuff. It's just no, sorry. If they don't want the thing to go there, you get a no. If they do want it to go there, you get a, well, the map had a mistake on it. And a lot of other examples like that. Yes, sir.
So just say property like that, they want to allow sewer and water. If this individual wanted to sell this property, the new owners couldn't get, if they were gonna build, if they planned to build, could they not get sewer and water? I mean, they just got it not in the plan to allow sewer and water for these properties?
That's not the way that I interpret the law. The way I interpret the law to be is you set density. Sewer was being run to these areas so that there wouldn't be septic. Then litigation, the 2007 litigation agreement was entered into that said once sewer and water is available to all these coastal high hazard areas, there will be a mandatory connection. So as the Cedar Island and all that, there's a litigation agreement there, yeah, so.
I understand that, but I'm saying if they were to sell a piece of one of these properties that does not have it today, is that the practice that's being done today, is not to allow?
Yes, and there are quite a few realtors that would attest to that put signs up on property, vacant lots for sale. And people bought them, and they said, they're telling us we can't have sewer or water, and that sent a shockwave through the realty community. So they went back and said, let me ask you about all my properties down here. What about this one? What about this one? I can pull you up in Taylor Coastal's minutes. Sandy Beach comes before the board. I want to ask you about a few properties that I represent. What about this one? And what about this owner? What about this owner? No, no, no. So the realtors started putting stickers on the realty signs that said, no utilities available. And people that needed to sell it were selling it at a discounted price. The real people got hurt and lost money on this thing.
I think they also put in place a waiver option in places that they would or could not supply service.
The waiver option came from,
Maybe like within the last 6 months or so.
right, that was a result of the dispute with the Weldons, where they said, oh, we can't do this. Even though I disagreed with their interpretation of the law and what they can and can't do under their own conditions, the way to get past Taylor Coastal so that we could actually try to do a zoning change and try to get them zoned for RVs and things like that before the market were to crash or something like that. We just needed to get past Taylor Coastal, and so we said, just give us a waiver. But the truth of the matter is, real doubts whether or not they're going to be able to do anything other than municipal sewer. Also, and here's the kicker that we didn't see when we were doing the waiver, the litigation agreement with the state doesn't give you a waiver option to make that deal in the first place. Your litigation agreement with the state says, not as to the Weldon property, because it's not mixed-use urban development, but as to all the ones that were zoned mixed-use urban, the agreement between the county is once sewer is available within a quarter mile, they'll be mandated to connect.
Yeah.
Could I ask a question?
Yes, ma'am.
Isn't one of the concerns that Taylor Coastal has referred to is that the limitations of their USDA RD loan is that it does not fund development?
Yes, they have claimed that. And so in the broadest terms possible, USDA from the get-go said, now this isn't for development, this isn't for development. But what I envisioned, what I took from that is, why would an agency come to a developed area knowing that you're about to hook up a bunch of homes to sewer and water to get the septic and get the leaching out of the ground? Why would they keep saying in their letters, this isn't for development, it's not for development? Probably, just throwing this out there, because they said, don't create this plant and use all its capacity to develop this new complex. This is meant for these first, right? But I think it's pretty unlikely that they meant only get to 45% capacity and then every other property down here can't do anything about it. That's number one. Number two is, if they were that serious about what development meant, define it. Because what is a development? Does that mean a commercial use? Maybe. If it can't be used for commercial use, what about the person that builds a second home here and they're gonna rent it out some on VRBO? Now you got a commercial use. You tell me I can't have sewer and water because you want to stretch the word development to its absolute max? No. And then lastly, let's say that you were to direct Taylor Coastal Sewer and Water and say, you are either going to, if it meets the terms of this litigation agreement, meaning it's within a quarter mile, and it's got an approved development plan, so long as you have capacity, you're gonna run water to it, or we're gonna start removing board members until we get board members that'll follow our litigation agreements, which is, frankly, I think the position you are left in and should take. But let's say that you do that, and the USDA comes marching down from DC and says, because this is the sky's falling argument that you'll be getting from Taylor Coastal Water and Sewer if they had actually agreed to show up. Oh, they'll foreclose on us. They'll come down here and our loan conditions are dependent, they'll foreclose on it. A federal agency could have walked down to a coastal Florida place and yanked the sewer and water out from under them and have sewage flowing out on the ground. Seriously? Not a chance. Not a chance. So, if they're scared to act, which frankly, I think it's just a placeholder excuse. I want to see development. And you'll get no for any old reason you can imagine until you do the homework like I did and start putting them down. You don't have capacity problems. You don't have this. But if the last one standing is we're worried about foreclosure, then you, the county commission, say, you know what, if USDA wants to roll into town and tell us they're going to foreclose and have sewer flowing on the streets, let them send that first letter and see how many senators that makes it to. And let's see if they still want to play that. And they won't, because they're not in the business of polluting the environment. They didn't give this loan to come and heckle municipalities. They gave this loan to help clean up the district. In fact, that's the mission statement for this whole agency. But it can't stifle development. Not when you've got this much capacity available, allow it to happen. You know, and then give people a place to, have sanitary services.
So if I understand this correctly, USDA agreed to the terms in 2013 that said they were gonna fund this project, which then incorporates this many, services or customers
Does.
to said parcels.
I don't have a letter from USDA that says that, because that question
The
wasn't
reason I
asked.
said this is because
Implied,
it's not the sense that they blindly agreed to, or something was added to after the fact, that the stipulations were put in place for this loan agreement.
Correct, and in the Taylor Coastal minutes, they knew about it too, and they discuss it, they actually say, well,
So even if Taylor Coastal didn't know that, USDA, who holds their note, did know that
was
at
responsible.
that time,
Was
which was
responsible
after
for
the
it.
fact that the last litigation came down
Yeah.
from the DCA.
2 years later.
Let me ask you this.
Yes, sir.
If you got 27 acres, there's 10, at one time that was 14, went to 4, and then it was negotiated to 10, right?
No, sir. You're talking about what would be buildable land?
Yes, on buildable land.
It was-
amount of units.
Per acre.
For the mixing.
So, it was supposed to, be part of the '07 litigation agreement that, well, before that, it was supposed to be 20 units per acre mixed
Yeah,
use. Or,
that was
and
perfect.
in '07, it was supposed to go to 12, but it got left out of that and several other properties. And by 2011, it's now 10 units per acre on just 14 of the 18 buildings.
Yeah.
But we've already kind of, had the density cut way down, but that's okay. But not down to 1, come on.
I haven't seen yet where it's, when in my reading, where 1 was in the original agreement.
It wasn't.
Where did that come from?
Well, if you want me to show you, I can show you these set of minutes where that was decided on.
Before
back
you
in
go there, let
05.
me ask you something else.
Yep.
If this part of the agreement with DCA and the people that do the, loan agreement, how do you come up with addendums to this agreement here and it's supposed to be law?
You'd have to get all the parties back to the table. It's a litigation agreement, you can't unilaterally modify it. That's the question. The county and the state, whoever the new DCA or version of which I'm guessing is DEP, the county, DEP, the now owners of the Woods property, and then the now owners of the Dr. Hutchins property would all have to agree to amend the agreement. It's a contract, in other words.
And the reason I'm asking this, it looked like, and I don't want to pass no judgment, I have never filed for an appointment to get to tap up down there. But if I had 14 acres and I can only hook 1 to it, do I need to sell the other 13 acres and let them get 1 hookup per acre?
Well,
When the density is 10,
right, that would seem like you gave up a lot of your rights, wouldn't it?
Mr. Bishop, you've been listening to this as well as we have, and I know you studied this.
Well, one of the things that needs to be made clear is the last time when we're talking about Dr. Hutchins and also the Woods and Ms. Redden, that's a separate one. And this is where they are at as a practical matter. And what Mr. Curtis is saying is that the buck is going to stop with y'all at some point. And I was wondering if Ray and your family had thought about filing not a deck action, but filing with the Water Authority to hook up like 2 acres for of that property to get multiple hookups. They denied, and where would the appeal go when they denied it? Right here, correct?
I don't know if that's where what the appeal process would be, or if the agency, it may be. Thing is we're not at the point of having a development plan yet, but we have been given a no by an agency.
Well,
And so we got this clock out here running on us that,
what I was thinking of was a small development plan, you know, or the whole thing, you know?
as to my folks' property, that might be something that could be fleshed out, might be a decent option, or it might not be, because I don't know how that's gonna intersect with the Burke-Harris Act, which is the one that puts us a year clock on us.
Yeah, the timing's not there.
Right, we're getting short already, and the Burke-Harris Act requires us to get a specialty appraiser, that, not just a regular appraiser, but a specialty one that has experience to say, I can tell you what the value would be with these development rights, versus the value without them, and that's the number that you go to the county and say, you gotta buy it, from me for this. That may be a good.
First condemnation, so it's not right.
That's right, and so, that may be what you're talking about, may be a good option if we have more time, but we're getting short on time, number one. Number two, it doesn't fix it for everybody else down there, because this right here is a mild sample. These folks, they're part of they've got a large parcel number, by acreage, should be, and they're in the 12 unit per acre zone, that should be 30, 40, 50, I don't know, something like that. Right now, a house. And then you got the Lundys up the way on J.L. Gibson. They had a developer run off several years ago. This is what they relayed to me, because they had a $3 million offer. They were gonna be able to retire. Instead, they're still working into their, forgive me if I got it wrong, mid to late 60s, don't know their ages, but at any rate, they're supposed to be retired. That was their nest egg. And they were told, and the developer that was interested in buying it was told, no, one house, don't care about your acreage, one parcel number, one house. That's their policy. It totally ignores your role as the land planner. You said mixed use urban. You agreed with the state of Florida in 12 units per acre, and that agency killed somebody's retirement plan. And they just didn't know that that was a violation of law. A lot of people down there just assume they get to do whatever they want to do, and you're just going to take yes as an answer or no as an answer. And that's how it's been for a while, but that's changing. The more development happens, whether it's Ray or some other lawyer, somebody was going to be in here telling you about this, and you need to get them under control quickly, please.
What you're basically saying is we have a board down there. Who, I mean, the commission wants these folks to be board?
And they have to be, not residents of it, they have to live, or I think have a residence within the district, which is that map that I showed you from Spring Warrior all the way down to Fish Creek.
Don't they have to be property owners?
They gotta be property owners. They gotta be property owners, but I don't think they have to have their primary residence within it. Yeah.
We got a board that's enabling growth.
They're disabling growth.
I mean, disabling growth, I'm sorry, within our community. I mean, it's an issue.
Just like that lot we were talking about selling down there, by the bridge.
Yeah.
It's platted on the plat, so you could get hooked up on it because it was platted out at one time. But this other property all around the area down there, it wasn't platted out in its lots at one time, so they're saying you can't get them. That's exactly what they're saying.
If they got capacity to hold it, somebody's willing to pay the bill.
Right.
Let's do it.
And you know, the early board that set this up, when you read the minutes, they were excited. They said, how can we get developers to hook up to us so that we'll have enough revenue? Because they were worried about being able to make the loan payments. They wanted development. They didn't read it that they couldn't do it. They just knew that the people that were already on the existing plat and existing homes and existing septic tanks had to come out, and those people get connections. They were first up. But nowhere back then did they look at it and say, once we get the people that were in existence, now we have to stop. That's not how the early board looked at it. An example, the Taylor County Keep Beach townhomes, you know, when you hit Keep Beach right across from the boat ramp, those were built before the sewer was there. And so you see in their minutes, they go, well, we told everybody else it's gonna be one parcel per connection, so how do we deal with that? And so they wrote a letter to USDA, and the USDA said, we don't wanna be involved in a case-by-case basis, but sure, go ahead and hook them up. That's in the early days. That was USDA's, that was their take then. Yes, hook up the development. And they had just recently come online with their self-contained sewer package thing, or septic package, and then they got switched over. It's kind of what they're supposed to be there for, which is not to stifle development. Development planning is your job. Remember the Vision 2060 plan? All that time and money went into it. You guys, or the board generally looked at it and said, yeah, we like this. We want some development up this corridor. Yeah, that's where you got your future land use map in part. That's why it's all mixed use urban. Of course, you had it at 20 and the state came in and said, oh, wait a minute, 12. Okay, fine, but you guys make those decisions. You weren't kicking that down to a water board and going, hey, will you decide what our planning should be, what our density should be? How about passing me some zoning regs? No, but that's the role that they're assuming. I don't think you need more examples than I've given you here today, probably not, but if you do, all you have to do is say, come tell us your story about Taylor Coastal Water and Sewer. You will need a week of 8-hour days. And my request, even though you can't take action today, is put this in your recommendation section of the agenda form. Is either to remove and replace the board, or the alternative, and I think you barely have enough time to follow route number 2 before we have to spend a bunch of money on this specialized appraiser so that we don't miss the mandatory deadlines. But is to basically read them in the Riot Act and ask them to take it to a vote. Here's what's gonna happen. We are the land planners. We make those decisions. And if, per the litigation agreement, a property is within 250, or a quarter mile of your infrastructure, and we, the county, approves a development plan on that, so long as you have capacity, you will provide it. Either commit to that and take it to a vote. If you know about it or you abstain, we're gonna pull you off the board, and we'll replace you with somebody that will follow our litigation agreements, because they're gonna draw you into fire. It's wild. They're like your child or your probationer almost. Like, you can't violate it. You can't throw me under the bus. Follow my lead, not the other way. So that's what I'm hoping will happen. So you get the board members on there that go, all right, it's a clear message. Will I follow what the county commission tells me the rules are about land use? If they say yes, awesome, stay on that board. If they say no, they abstain, time to find new board members. Yes, sir.
I'm a little bit familiar with what you're saying. When the city, I was on the city, when the city mandatory hookup, if there was sewer placed in front of your house, or within that certain space. We done that. Every place in the city of Perry where that sewer line went, and it was possible to hook up, we demanded that it happen, and it happened. People didn't say, best things than cheese grits. You know, the only person who had a problem with that was the plumber. You know, the man that pumped his septic.
And to Taylor Coastal's credit, you know, if you drink water out of the tap down there that's coming from their facility, it's good water. You don't get the chemical flavor and their reports come back as being clean. So, you know, kudos to running a good operation, but you can't tell people, you can't make up arbitrary rules and say, you know, imagine in their case, they look at the future land use map, the governing document of the county on land use, and they go, right on the face of it, 10 units per acre. Yeah, I want to buy this. I'm going to put in a lot of money. I'm going to spend some of my retirement money. I'm going to take out a line of credit. Sorry to spill your beans. Borrow. We go and buy it thinking that's what they have. And a month after closing, oh, I'm sorry, you looked at the wrong document. You should have come and told us. We would have told you only get one, even though the county is, yeah, they can't.
Mr. Chairman, could we request to hear from Taylor Coastal folks at a regular board meeting, so we might find a path to not wind up in litigation?
Next board meeting, I think would be sufficient, and I don't think they should be an option to decline.
Yeah, I mean, I would, extend an invitation to, not just chairperson, but the full board.
Okay.
And, so that we can be, clear and communicate where we're at, what we understand here about this, and if there's something there council wants to present, certainly he could, or she could be invited.
Back. Okay.
I would ask that though, your invite, tell them to provide anything that they, give them a copy of this, tell them to provide anything that they want, but tell them to do it by a date certain in advance. And to provide a copy to your county staff so they can have it in your packet where you can review it. And also, so that we can review it. Because what I don't want to see is we show up here to a meeting and they come in with, 40 new documents that no one in here has ever seen. And they say, Steve told you so. You guys look at me and go, what do you think about this? Well, I don't know. Now, I've hit them with every public records request I can imagine. So I think I've got everything in hand, but maybe not. But I do know the stuff that I have in hand are their submissions to DEP from last year that shows not a capacity issue and, everything. And I've got their entire body of minutes from the, all the way back. I cataloged them. In fact, I found out that they didn't have about 24, 26 months worth on their website. And me cataloging is what helped them identify that, where they could get them posted on there. Like, I think I've gotten everything from them. But I don't want to have that surprise that then burns another 2 weeks or a month while we wait so we can all review it and then come back. Okay. Is that fair?
Certainly.
Thank you for your time. I don't know if you want to hear from anyone in the crowd, or you might just have some show of hands. Who's had a bad experience with Taylor Coastal or knows someone that has? Yeah.
Mr. Chairperson, if I may, I just want to clarify that I did send an invitation to, I sent it directly to Lynette Center. And the frame of that invitation was to discuss the limitations of the USDA RD funding. That was the first invitation because that was the scope of the request at that time. And then I did send another email on May 28th notifying Taylor Coastal Water Sewer District that Mr. Curtis has requested to be placed on the June agenda to discuss the limitations of service to the Fish Creek property owned by Donna Michelle Curtis. So just to be transparent, the discussion was not about limitations of service to any other property owners or any other areas in my invitation to Taylor Coastal Water and Sewer District. So if we're going to invite them to a meeting, I think we need to phrase it so that they understand we're not just talking about one parcel if that's what you wish to discuss, or you're not just discussing the limitations and funding from USDA RD. So I need some, and if I'm not mistaken, they have a board meeting this afternoon. So they may need to be notified today so they have time to discuss it at their board meeting and then answer if they can attend the next regularly scheduled board meeting.
All right, sir. We need to do that. Bring all the information they have that's pertinent to this particular situation. Not only Mr. Curtis, but the Fish Creek and Spring Warrior and, Miss Catherine Reddy. Whoever might be involved. We don't need to be haggling with this. No, we need to move more important things.
Well,
that you're doing is
it's a
more important.
really lengthy list of people that have been denied, and so know what you're asking for. If you're asking them to show show up ready to defend every denial they've done in just the past 5 years. We don't need a big vote.
And that's why I'm asking the question, exactly what do you wish to discuss with Taylor Coastal and Water District? Because they need an opportunity to prepare.
Sure, I mean, from my, seat, I'd like to understand, this continuation as to what appears to be an inconsistency in their extending services that they're required to extend. And whether that be to a parcel that's permitted or identified as a density of 10 units per acre, or 14 is here or there, in the sense that it's not one. And so I want to understand why we have consistent inconsistencies.
So should we request that they be prepared to discuss possible inconsistencies in granting or denying service within their district?
Yes, ma'am. I would say with the documents or language or representation as to why.
That'll get their attention real good.
I'd be wanting to know why they declined to come to this meeting.
Well, I mean, if their council.
The answer to you.
Yeah, so if their council recommends that, that's why my invitation includes their counselor as well as their board. And so I'm not trying to get them in a compromised place. I can respect that. But this is to a workshop, and my invitation is for a board meeting.
Yes.
Board discussion.
I think we need to take the time to do what we need to do and do it right.
I think it makes sense to ask them to show up and explain why they can dictate one when you said 10, why they can dictate one when you entered into a litigation agreement for 10 units per acre, why they can say one when in other areas 12 units per acre. And then, yeah, be ready. If you don't like their explanation, take a vote to tell them to either vote up or down at their meeting to follow your guidance, but yes.
I think that you need to have a special meeting.
Okay.
I think your notice to the Taylor Coastal Waters Sewage, whatever the name, board, is that y'all are going to determine the future of that board. In other words, let them know that it's the future of the board. So you'll have the ability to do one of these 4 things or 5 things or whatever things that you determine would be in the best interest of the county. Follow me? Don't follow me?
Yeah.
So they can't say, well, we didn't know what y'all were gonna do, because you don't know what you're gonna do, but you need to have they need to have notice of what very well may happen.
So the invitation would need to read,
You could pull the language right off my request. Mr. Curtis came before the board on this date and requested that the board consider taking these actions.
4 options.
We would like to hear from you, or the board wants to hear from your entire board and your council on such and so, or we set a special meeting or what have you. Be prepared to answer the allegations made in this or whatever, and then make sure that they give you written responses in advance so you can review them.
Sure.
That sound right?
Yes, sir.
Would that be a special meeting before the regularly scheduled meeting?
that's probably not enough time.
Not enough time?
I mean,
Okay,
I would
what,
say
and what
let's
day
give
do you
them
think
enough
would be
time
good?
to
When is our next meeting? July what?
July, 5th?
July 5th.
Yes, sir.
Okay, if we have a special meeting, then we can have it when? When would?
Well, we're starting budget workshops July 19th.
Okay.
So maybe the second week in July, does that meet the time frame?
Second week in July, it's around the 14th or 15th?
That'd be the 12th, that Monday.
We'll probably be able to call off the appraiser, but we had on our calendars July 1, or the first week of July is when we need to start trying to hire one. Because they're about 2 months out, because there are a very small number of them statewide.
can you make tentative arrangements, or is this
Well,
something?
we'll try to do it without money out of pocket,
Okay.
but if it comes down to, if we have money out of pocket to be prepared in case, you know, whatever, the deadline gets here, we gotta do it.
July 12th,
July 12th?
I'm just throwing a date out there.
Okay.
Monday evening. That's if everyone else.
Okay. I have no problem with it.
July 12th.
And that's a special meeting.
Okay, I mean,
What about you, Jack? July 12th, 6 o'clock. Mr. Bishop,
We'll make it.
you think it?
Yes, sir.
Clerk will be here.
Or his representative.
Okay, all right, good deal. Mr. Lynn?
LaWanda, your communication, if I understand correctly, has been with Lynette.
Yes, sir.
Have you had a response from her,
Regarding,
the invitation?
yes.
Did you share with us what that response was?
Just to try to regurgitate what, from what I understand, it was the board who voted not to attend the workshop and instead asked Commissioner Newman, from what I understand, and that's what the minutes reflect, or it was a consensus of the board not to attend the workshop and instead invite Commissioner Newman to attend their meeting, which I believe is this afternoon.
Mr. Newman, are you gonna attend their meeting this afternoon?
No, sir, I'm not.
Only suggestion I've got to hopefully improve things would be to, instead of sending the invitation to attend the next special meeting or whatever it's called, instead of sending it only to Lynette, I would suggest sending it to every board member. I think that would, we would plug the hole. That's all, just suggestion.
You can, I mean, you can send it to it. Okay. Is there anything else to come before the board? Is there any other you have anything to say? Okay. I think that's it, right? Okay. Go ahead, Joe. Is that adjourned?
There's just one more.
Oh, you got through your list. I thought
We don't have to go through it. I needed some guidance from the board on a couple of projects. On the second page, there's a conceptual courthouse improvement project.
Yeah.
The legislative request was not funded. So my question is, does the board want to start looking at alternative funding mechanisms for that project? That was to basically rebuild the elevator or replace the elevators, which are quite old at this point. I think there was an air quality study and some equipment, AV equipment for security equipment for law enforcement. Is that something that you want to wait and resubmit for the next funding cycle? We came very close to being funded last fiscal year, I believe. We did not receive many funded projects this year. And I believe that somewhere in August, we can make another request. Is that what you wish to do, is make that another earmark request or to seek alternative funding?
That's gonna be quite costly, is it not?
Yes, sir.
I know, I
believe it was around $438,000 at one time. And that may have been without the generator. It's pretty costly.
I would seek legislative appropriation.
And then, the Steenhatchee boat ramp mobile home renovation. You know, we've been looking at this for a couple of years. Staff really hasn't come up with any suggestions, any viable suggestions for utilizing that structure. We're right in the middle of scallop season right now. I don't recommend that we do anything with that now. But my question is, at some point in the future, do you wish just to try to sell that mobile home and have included We can put it on our GovDeals website. We can sell the structure, and included in that is that it must be relocated. It must be removed and relocated at the winning bidder's expense.
What's the purpose of that today?
It's just in there.
It's just a hall, I guess.
No, it's an empty structure. It's on our boat ramp parking property, so it's elevated. But we have continual maintenance costs, if it's damaged during a storm, and we've tried to keep it in fairly good condition, thinking that there would be a future use for it, but we really haven't identified any use for it. And to be able to utilize that, we would have to install an elevator, for compliance reasons. So we can either tear it down, which I kind of hate to do if it's usable. That would be the simplest solution at this point. But I hate to do that. If someone can purchase it and they can move it and they can use it, I think that's something that may be a viable use for that structure. I just wanted some input from y'all, so we can at least think about, what we can do with that in the future.
I agree, sell it,
Okay,
Okay.
yeah.
someone else can play the movie.
Bids on it, guarantee they have to move it in bid, and that'd be good enough.
And that would save us the expense, the manpower and the expense of either continuing to, try to renovate it or to, tear it down ourselves. And that's really all I had, unless y'all had some questions. Obviously, a lot of our projects are on hold because of increased.
That TBD, to be determined.
Yes, sir.
Anything else? Anything?
No, sir.
Okay. Do we adjourn?
We buy lunch.
Oh.
Half lunch, huh?
Yes, all